And good afternoon, everyone, from St. Louis, Missouri, and the home of the Missouri Institute of Mental Health. My name is Tom Pansella. Thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon from wherever you are. We appreciate you joining us today. I'll introduce our speaker to you in just a moment. But first, in case you're interested in purchasing CEUs for today's program, there is a link underneath the video window for purchasing CEUs. I've noticed a couple of our veterans have already found that link, so it'll also be sent to you in a follow-up email following the program. Also, our speaker slides are down there. We've converted them to a PDF. I will say, though, that they got a little large when we converted this particular group. They're there. You may want to do a right-click and save and put them on your desktop or something rather than trying to download them as a pop-up because they might not process quickly enough. It's about a 40 meg file. Finally, there's a link underneath the video window as well to the Mental Health America of Eastern Missouri. Right. I meant to memorize that because I've been around long enough to know the previous name of the organization. But if you want to visit their website at any time, please do that as well. If you have questions or other feedback during today's program, please use the chat box underneath the video window, right next to the blue button that says Say. Just type your comment. The first time you do that, you might have to give yourself a nickname. You should never have to log in, however. If you find a box that says Log In, you hit the other chat button underneath the video. Do the one a little lower than that says Say. All right, so now I'd like to introduce Riisa Rawlins Easley, and she is the Director of Mental Health Promotion for Mental Health America of Eastern Missouri. She received her master's degree in social work from Washington University here in St. Louis. She has over 10 years of experience working for nonprofit organizations in the St. Louis area. She is skilled in delivering evidence-based seminars on a variety of mental health topics, such as stress and workplace wellness. She teaches individuals the tools needed to make simple changes that impact mental wellness and overall well-being. And Riisa, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be here. So glad to join you again from Mental Health America of Eastern Missouri. Before we get started, I'd just like to give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do. You'll see our mission here on the slide is to promote mental health and to improve the care and treatment of persons with mental illness through advocacy, education, and service. One of the things I love about this organization is that it covers the full spectrum of mental wellness, is what I like to say. So we talk about chronic disease. Often when you say mental illness or mental health, people tend to go to the chronic diseases. But we also do some education to talk about how mental wellness or mental health impacts all of us, to change the conversation about overall health, including mental health, and when we talk about overall health. When I came on board with Mental Health America, we thought, it's a really interesting time, and it would be a good opportunity to start to have some conversations where they don't generally take place around mental health. And we were thinking of some positive ways to do that were non-threatening, where people would be open and receptive to talking about mental health. So our approach is to talk actually about workplace wellness. So we've developed a series that talks about workplace wellness, and we address issues such as stress, we address issues such as burnout. And we notice that there's a trend in the country where a lot of people are starting to talk about workplace wellness. It's not uncommon to go to an organization and hear that they have maybe a Pilates class, or they'll have someone come in and they'll talk about nutrition. Well, we said this is great, this is wonderful to start thinking about how our health and well-being impacts our ability to be effective in the workplace. But we'd like to expand that conversation, and I often say healthcare is not just the neck down. We have to infuse how we're doing mentally and physically impact one another, and what are their natural correlations, knowing that our bodies operate as systems. So what are some of the things we know? We know that employees who feel as though their employers care about their well-being are more happy and satisfied in their job. They tend to stay longer within their jobs. Employers that look at things like workplace wellness have shown a commitment to looking at their most valuable asset, that being their staff and their employees. So we said, what a great opportunity to encourage this trend that's taking place and to expand the conversation to talk about something that we've come to understand and know is critically important to our overall well-being. And so the first stage of this conversation for us has become stress. How oftentimes do you hear in a day, oh my goodness, I'm stressed out? It's something that has become such a part of our vernacular. And we've become accustomed to high-stress situations, to high-stress environments, to high-stress lives. And so I often ask the question, when you hear someone say, I'm stressed, what happens? What comes after that? Unfortunately, it tends to be nothing. Well, we want to put a bookmark in that conversation, and we want to stop and think about how is our experience of stress and with stress impacting our ability to function well in the workplace and in our everyday lives. Rather than wearing stress as a badge of honor, I hear people say, I'm stressed out, and I hear someone else respond, oh, you think you're stressed? Oh, you should see what I'm dealing with today. And we're kind of proud of the amount of stress and all of the things that the responsibilities we carry in our lives. Well, it's great to be engaged, but we are coming to understand that when we have heightened levels of stress that we don't attend to, there are some negative ramifications that we'll see. So that's why we thought, you know what, this is a great place to interject ourselves in the conversation, because we know that stress unmanaged can have some damaging impact. And so how do we take control of stress before stress takes control of us? And so why, again, this conversation is important is because there are a lot of implications that stress can have within all of us, in all of our systems, if we don't pay attention and if we're not careful. And so we're talking about unmanaged stress. Some of the things that we've seen, that studies have shown, can happen if we don't take care of stress. I've said already about systems. Being a social worker, we talk a lot about systems. We talk about the different systems within which we operate, within which we function. But we're also talking about the different systems of our body. We know that it's not just physical. It's also mental. It's also emotional. And stress has an impact on every one of our systems, and it influences how we're able to respond, adapt, and effectively deal with all of the systems that we encounter, whether it be our work life or our interpersonal relationships and communication. Some of the implications of unmanaged stress include, on the physical side, allergies, high blood pressure, heart attacks, stroke, migraines, arthritis, diabetes. We've heard some of these things, and some of us deal with some of these issues, myself included. And so I'm not saying that you don't go to the doctor and check what these physical symptoms are, and I'm not saying that we're not going to seek medical help. I always like to put that caveat in. But I am saying when we're addressing some of these issues, I think it's important that we stop and think, what other factors come into play? I know I myself at times suffer from allergies, and I have cross-seasonal allergies, but I've also begun to notice as I dive more deeply into the study of stress that when I have a lot of stress in my life and I'm not doing anything to manage it, that my allergies have gone haywire. Now, in the past, I say, okay, well, I have allergies. I'm used to it, so you just take a Zyrtec or whatever it is you take and you just keep moving. But it never occurred to me to check, wait a minute, the mold count is not higher, so why are my allergies fluctuating like this? Migraines, for example, when I experience, and a lot of people I speak to, when they experience heightened levels of stress, they have more of an issue with migraine headaches and things of that nature. So again, these are things we experience, and just like stress being, a badge of honor, we just know it's there and we keep moving. We don't stop and take the time to assess why. So that's what this conversation is for. When you're experiencing some of these symptoms, just pause and say, wait a minute, does stress have anything to do with this, and is there something that I can do differently? What are some of the other symptoms of unmanaged stress? Well, mentally, stress can cause preoccupation, racing thoughts, difficulty making decisions, sleeping trouble. Again, these are things that we experience from time to time. There are moments in our life or seasons in our life when we have heightened levels of stress, and we might experience some of these symptoms. But when we don't manage stress, it becomes more of an issue, and these become more of a problem. Memory loss, overriding pessimistic thoughts. And this is not that occasional, oh, where did I put my keys? But this is when it becomes recurring. And then when the symptoms become more severe, stress may be a factor, and there may be something that we need to address in that situation. And we talk about systems. So we've talked about some of the physical implications. We've talked about some of the mental implications, and there are emotional implications as well. The three major ones that have been highlighted throughout the research that I've done deal with anger, anxiety, and depression. So anger being the feeling of helplessness, that you can't resolve an issue that's outside of your control. And so at times we all experience anger, of course, in our lives. However, our experience with stress tends to exacerbate our emotional experiences and our ability to effectively manage or handle the emotions that we encounter day to day. And so that's, again, why the conversation about stress is important, and why we like to remind folks that it's not a badge of honor. It is something we experience, but there may be something that we can do about it. We know that stress is inevitable. We all experience stress. I haven't met a single person who has said, oh, no, I don't have any stress in my life. We all experience it in various ways, and in various seasons of our life, it fluctuates. But while stress is inevitable, we want to think about what are some simple choices that we can make that can equip us to actually use stress as a tool, rather than it being detrimental and having some of those negative effects that we discussed earlier. Because our bodies respond to our perception of stress. So how we perceive stress, and we'll talk more about this a little later on, is really critical to our ability to manage the stress that we encounter. Studies show that people are more likely to be on the job and performing well when they're both physically and emotionally well. And so again, when we're talking about health and well-being, we want to make sure that we expand that conversation, and we're talking not just about our physical health, but our mental and emotional well-being as well. And although we tend to go immediately to the distress and we go to the negative side of stress when we think about stress, all of which are true, we talked about some of the negative implications, I want to offer what I consider a more empowering response to stress. And it starts with, for me, with the very definition of the word stress. Stress is simply the nonspecific response of the body to any demand for change. So when I started looking at that and dissecting that a little bit more, that for me in itself was a bit empowering. Because if it's any response to change, it doesn't have to necessarily be negative change, though that tends to be initially what we think of. It's a relatively new term that was coined, it's credited with Hans Seele in about 1936. It's just our bodies pumping chemicals into that heightens and quickens our blood pressure and our response to outside factors. It increases heart rate, blood pressure, blood glucose, and heightened senses. So if that's the case, and stress is simply a response, our body's physiological response to situations and circumstances in our life that alter our homeostasis, then that means there must then be good stress. Because there are things that happen in our life that cause us to have this type of response. There's not an associated threat with it, but it does still produce that same chemical response within our bodies. This type of stress is what we call good stress. And so for me, that in itself, again, was very empowering. Because when I think of stress, I'm not just immediately going to all of the negative things and all the things that I have on my plate that are waiting for me to do once I leave the office or once I leave my home, but I can also think about some of the positive things in my life. This stress is deemed healthful or giving a feeling of fulfillment. And again, it's the same physiological response without the associated threat. It can improve heart function, and it can also help to make the body resistant to infection. So I said, okay, we're making some progress here. We think about stress, and I'm not being stressed out just simply hearing the word. I'm taking more control over how I perceive what stress is by knowing that there are some benefits to stress. Now, we do also experience some stressors that aren't necessarily positive. This is not the eustress. There are things that there is some associated risk or challenge with it. However, there are still some positive attributes that we receive from this encounter of stress in our lives. We know that our bodies are designed with that what we call fight or flight response. And that's what stress is designed to do. If you need to get out of the way and you're in oncoming traffic, your body responds and it gives you the adrenaline you need to move to safety. And that's the same kind of response stress produces. It results from quick surprises that need a response. It produces the body's stress response, and the triggers aren't always happy or exciting, but there are some things that I found that for me were very encouraging in response to stress. Early studies have shown that stress, that experience of stress, may help to protect against some diseases of aging such as Alzheimer's. And why does that work? Because again, those neurological pathways are firing and it's causing the brain activity to increase and to continue. It keeps the brain cells working at its peak capacity. This is one reason how stress can be helpful and important in our lives. It also has been shown to suppress the production of estrogen. And why is that important? Because some studies have linked this being preventing breast cancer, so lower incidences of breast cancer. And I love this one. Moderate stress levels before surgery have actually been shown to have better outcomes. Those with moderate stress levels have better outcomes than those with lower stress levels or those with high stress levels. And that for me was really encouraging. So we need that stress response. And so for me, again, this is helping me to reframe the way I think about and consider the stress that I experience in my life. But then there's, of course, the chronic stress. And this is generally the type of stress folks think about when they say I'm stressed out. They think about that long-term stressor that they experience repeatedly. The negative effects of this stress, when it begins to flood, the hormones bombard our body. This lasts, I'm talking about long-term stress, not something that happens and it's over, but it continues and it can go on for weeks or months. This is the type of stress that's blamed for some of the earlier slides that we talked about, the high blood pressure and heart disease, exhaustion, depression. And over time, what happens is the heart muscles and the valves become awash with epinephrine. And this actually causes changes in the way the arteries and in the way your arteries are and the way the cells are able to regenerate. So this is why, again, it's critical that we manage the stress that we do encounter. Typically at this point when we're engaged in the seminar, we talk a little bit about job and work-related stress as well and ask for some examples of things that people experience on the job. But what we're usually thinking about when we talk about this type of stress, job stress, is when there's a mismatch between what the expectations are in the job and the resources that you have to be able to fulfill them. Or there may be a mismatch in your values and the values of the mission and values of the employer for whom you're working. And this is where it becomes an issue as far as job or work-related stress is concerned. Studies have shown that 40% of workers say their job is very or extremely stressful. And 25% view their jobs as the #1 stressor in their lives. 65% of workers said that workplace stress has caused them some level of difficulty. So again, for those who are talking about workplace wellness, it's wonderful. And so how important is it then to not just think about physically how we can improve our wellness, but how we can address things such as stress to help improve our level of mental well-being as well. And so again, just some of the signs and symptoms of excessive job and workplace stress may include, and I like to talk about the signs and symptoms, I'll interject here, because oftentimes, again, we might experience these things, but we don't necessarily pause to see where they're coming from, or if there's anything we can do about it, and if so, what? We don't stop to see where they can be attributed to. What are some of those symptoms? Feeling anxious or irritable or depressed, the apathy or loss of interest in work, problems sleeping, fatigue. Again, they cross the physical, mental, behavioral. These are all symptoms of excessive job or workplace stress. And so what I'd like for you to actually take a moment to do, and we're not sitting in the room together, but I still would like for you to actually take a moment to think about, if you were to have to think about the 5 biggest stressors in your life, what would those be? And I like to have this conversation after we talk about the different definitions of stress and what some of the symptoms of stress are, because I think we have an opportunity to think with a different paradigm. And so usually what I'll have folks do is to actually physically write out what the 5 biggest stressors in your life can be. And again, we talked about different types of stress. It doesn't have to be something negative. It can definitely be something positive. It can be chronic stress. It can be long-term stress. So once you think about what those stressors are, I'd actually like you to think about categorizing them. How would you categorize those stressors in your life? Would you consider that stress to be a good stress, eustress? Would you consider it to be acute stress? Would you consider it to be chronic stress? And I'm actually going to give you a few moments just to kind of reflect on that. And I'll go into a little bit more detail as to why. Some of the things I've seen people write often are work demands as a stressor. I've seen people write moving, birth of a child or a grandchild. I've seen people write the loss of a loved one when thinking about some of the biggest stressors in their lives. Thinking about paying for college tuition or the academic success of a child are others that I've frequently seen. But what becomes really interesting for me is the placement. When you have to stop and think about how would I characterize that particular stressor. And one of the things that I feel is most telling is that I'll sometimes see the same stressor in different categories across the board, which is really interesting because it talks about how we perceive the stress that we encounter in our lives. And again, I said earlier that our bodies respond to our perception of the threat, our perception of stress. I've seen where we'll have some people, depending on the group that I'm in, if I do it in a team, where there'll be a team that has a lot of good stress and you see a smattering of stress in the other categories. I've seen some teams will have a lot of chronic stress and then a few smatterings in the other categories. And that's always interesting because it tells about the tone of the workplace and the work environment. So it's a really interesting activity to conduct in groups or in teams. One thing that I find really interesting, I participated in a workshop a couple months ago, and I was walking around and I like to read what people post as far as their stressors and how their characterization of the stressors in their lives. And I was on the good stress category, and I looked to make sure that I explained it correctly and where they were aligned. And someone had put the loss of a loved one. And so I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And so after everyone finished the activity, I stopped and I said, I see here that someone put the loss of a loved one under good stress. And if you're willing to share, I'd love to hear more about that. And it was really interesting because the person who wrote it then said, I had to give myself permission to be okay with the fact that I lost my loved one. And the reason why I say it's a good stress is because they were suffering for a really long time and now they're not. And so for me to move on and to be okay with something that was very significant in my life, this is how I had to handle it. And so one of the takeaways from this type of activity is that we realize that it's what you perceive. It's different for everyone. What I consider to be a good stress may not be a good stress for everyone, and vice versa. And that's okay. The other thing I think is really important is actually pinpointing and highlighting what those stressors are in our lives. Because oftentimes we're on autopilot. We have so many demands and competing priorities that we don't really take an opportunity to stop and think about, well, what are those things that are most stressful in my life? So that exercise actually helps you pause and say, you know what? These are the 5 things that are most stressful. And often when I speak to folks after that activity, I say, you know what? I knew I was stressed out, but I wasn't exactly sure why. This activity helped me to understand exactly what it was that was causing the stress in my life. So that's why I think it's a really powerful activity. And it's also empowering because others will look at the stressors that people put up and say, you know what, I never really thought of that as a good stress, but now that you mention it, I can see some positives out of this stress. So that's why I love to have people, even though, not to stress you out, that's not the purpose of the activity, but the purpose of it is just to bring your own awareness to what those stressors are in your life, because if you know what the issue is, then you're more empowered to be able to do something about it. So thank you for indulging me, even though we're not in the same room together. So we've talked about stress. We've talked about the definitions of stress. We've given some thoughtful consideration to what stressors exist in our own lives. So now what do you do about it? This is my favorite part. The doom and gloom, that's done. We want to talk about what can we do about the stress we encounter. We've already said stress is inevitable. So give me some clues. Give me some tips. Well, the first step, the most important step, is always recognizing your triggers and the warning signs of stress. And again, that's why we start with the activity of highlighting your 5 biggest stressors. What causes you stress? How do you feel before, during, and after stressful encounters? And not just physically, but emotionally as well. I have children, and I've done a lot of work with young people, and I often tell them, listen to your body. What does that mean? I watch children and they'll get angry, and you can see it from a mile away. Watching as an adult, and you see the interaction, and you see it start to devolve, and you see the little fists clench up and the little, lips poke out. And it's amazing to me how at the end of this, and you can see it brewing for a while, they're so shocked when they actually get into an altercation, like they didn't see it coming. And so what I do with the young people is I take them away and I say, well, what was your body telling you? And they say, huh? And I said, well, how did you feel? My face was hot. Oh, your face was hot. So what do you think that means when your face is hot? Oh, I was breathing hard. Yeah. Oh, my fists were and they can start to recognize, oh, my body gives me clues when I'm upset. Well, how does your body feel when you're happy? Oh, my body gives me clues when I'm happy. And they know it, they just don't make that connection. And so I often have to remind myself, as I remind the children, listen to your body. When you're beginning to become stressed out about something, your body will give you clues. Everyone is different. But what are your signs and symptoms? How does your body let you know what, I need to take 5. I need to step away. I need to take a deep breath, whatever it is you need to do. How does your body tell you that? It was really interesting to me. I had a workshop and there were 2 people. I had never heard this before. But 2 people in the same workshop said, when I feel stressed out, my right hip hurts. I was like, I'd never heard that. But how wonderful that you understand that your hip hurting means you're stressed out. Because if my hip hurt, I wouldn't have thought of stress. But you know that's how your body responds. So what are those symptoms? Often people feel tired. They feel lethargic. They feel, some people say, I just want to take a nap. I get really tired. And so it's important to know when you're becoming stressed, what does your body say? How do you respond physically, emotionally, mentally? To be aware, because it's like the canary in the coal mine. Your body and your emotions tell you when something is wrong, and then you'll know how to address it. What's another strategy? Interestingly, to manage stress in your life, you should increase the amount of stress in your life, but being very intentional about it. Increasing the good stress in your life. We know that we can't control the fact that we will experience stress, but what we do have some control over is the type of stress that we experience. Good stress comes from putting yourself out there and developing those positive, healthy relationships. It comes from setting a goal and chipping away at that goal and accomplishing something new. I know for me, I don't know if anyone's like me, I love to check things off a list. So I make task lists for myself, and when I do it, I check it off. I love it so much that sometimes I will admit I will go back and write something on my list that I've done that I forgot to put on the list just so I can check it off because it feels good. Whatever it is for you. But setting goals, gaining knowledge, and see if we're really clever about it, the knowledge that we gain, we feel gratified from gaining that knowledge, but it can also help us in another difficult or stressful situation that we're encountering. And then gratification. Not talking about the instant gratification. They like to talk about our society is now instant gratification. We want what we want and we want it now. But no, the feeling that comes from knowing I worked hard at this and I accomplished it and it's a job well done. Activities that promote just the right kind of challenge. It takes more effort to enjoy, but it's well worth the effort. So what are those things for you? It's different for everyone. What are those things for you? And then managing your outlook. I've said before, and I can't emphasize enough, how important your perception is. Because again, our bodies respond to our perception of the stressors that we encounter. So what do? Focus on your existing resources. If you don't perceive something as a threat, you're not going to take it as a threat. So being able to frame your thinking to say, this is not necessarily a threat, but it's an opportunity or a challenge. Reframing it, looking for the hidden potential benefits of a situation. I call some of those resume builders. And what I mean by that is sometimes you might go into a job and you have a job description and then you know at the bottom how they always put other duties as assigned. Yeah, you've seen it. So those other duties as assigned that you don't necessarily want, you don't really necessarily think they fall within your job description, but they come across your desk anyway. And so my strategy, I look at it and say, you know what? This is a resume builder. At the end of the day, I'm going to know something that I didn't know. I'm going to acquire a skill that I previously didn't have, and I'm going to be able to use this for the rest of my life. And so it's a resume builder. I may not have wanted to build my resume in that way, but at the end of the day, I did, and I can benefit from that. You know, and sometimes changing your thinking, I'm not pretending like everything is all wonderful and fairies and ponies and it's great, because that's just not reality. Sometimes it's something that is unfortunate. It's a circumstance that you didn't want to face. And if anything else, my ability to transform my thinking to say, you know what? I've been through something similar to this and I have the skills. I have the strength to make it through this situation. So even if I can't grin and bear it, I can at least grit my teeth and stand flat-footed and say, I'm going to make it through this. Because that sometimes just that shift in thinking is all you need to give you the impetus to go forward. Once you get in the practice of transforming your thinking, it becomes more automatic. So it's training your brain to think more positive. And it's actually a really powerful tool in managing the inevitable stress that we experience in our lives. And then I didn't give you that slide. I apologize for that. I did not advance the slide. And then there's developing a personal stress management plan. I've done a lot of strategic planning in my career, and so I love the idea of developing a plan. Now, for me, journaling is something that's really helpful. And that's one strategy that is often promoted, is to start a journal. And what would you put in that journal? A stress journal. It identifies what caused the stress. Again, listening to your body. How did you feel before and after? What did you do to make it through that stressful situation? How did you resolve that stressful situation? What did you do to make yourself feel better? And I like that because sometimes when I encounter something and I'm feeling a little negative and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to make it through that situation, I can look back and ground myself and remind myself, no, it's not the end of the world. The sky is not falling. Here are some things that I did that were really helpful. Hey, let me try those strategies again. Or, oh, I tried that. It didn't work. Let me do something that's a little different. Let me tweak that, and hopefully it'll be more effective. And so that's one of the benefits of journaling. And then doing something that you enjoy. Setting realistic goals of things that you enjoy to help to manage your stress. And again, I can't emphasize enough, for everyone, that's very different. So for me, to manage my stress, I may need to go out and walk a couple of miles and just enjoy nature. That's not for everyone. So what are those things that you specifically enjoy that you know helps you to feel better, has that cathartic effect? Setting aside time for yourself. We all need relaxation and recreation. It's vitally important, even if you have to schedule it. And I know people who say, you know what, I write myself. I block off that time on the schedule because when everything is going haywire and there are a lot of competing priorities, I'm the one that falls off of the schedule. And it's easy to forget about that, but it's important to make time for yourself. And then remembering that to do it with commitment and to start where you are. It can be a daunting thought, an overwhelming thought, because there's so much stress, I don't even know where to begin when I think about trying to alleviate or manage that stress. But knowing that nearly all stress-reducing activity has immediate benefits, but it's more effective if you stick to it over longer periods of time. And what are some of those benefits? It's increased physical well-being, increased energy, increased alertness, emotional benefits. So developing a plan so that you can go back and see what's working. And so you can modify it if it's not working and continue for those things that are working. And what are some other strategies? For the workplace. So we talk about in our personal lives and we talk about the workplace, but the truth of the matter is, just as we can't separate our bodies from our minds, we can't really separate our work selves from our other selves. It's still the same self. And so the truth of the matter is, the strategies that are effective for you at work are going to be some of the same strategies that are effective in your life in general. But again, it starts with recognizing the warning signs of excessive stress at work. Recognizing what are those things that stress you out. I've spoken to people who say, oh my gosh, at one point they loved their job, but then now all of a sudden they just hate their job and everything about it. And so I asked, well, you know, what is it that's frustrating you about your job? Did the work requirements or the workload change? No, that didn't change. The people that you work with, are they different? Is it a different team? No, it's the same team. Okay, did something happen that no. Okay, so what is it that's causing you all of a sudden now to, I didn't think about it that way. And a lot of times it's because we are experiencing heightened levels of stress. And it can be something specific that someone is doing without knowing that's causing us heightened levels of stress. So another thing that I like to do when I work with teams is to actually ask people, what are your biggest pet peeves? Do you have pet peeves in the office? And we write them down and we switch them around and we share, we put them up anonymously so folks can know. For me, for example, I'll give you one. When I'm writing grants, there will come a time when I am in the zone and I need to focus and the words are flowing and it's wonderful. Now, if that is interrupted, who knows when that's going to come back? Like, it's hard to get that moment. Grant writers know what I'm talking about. And so if I'm in the zone and someone disrupts me, it just throws me all off and it really stresses me out. Well, now, of course, my colleagues would not interrupt me just to stress me out or just to irritate me. I had to be able to first recognize what it was that was a stressor for me, and then to effectively communicate that with my colleagues. And then once we all knew, okay, so this is what happens, and so this is what means when the door is closed, because she's usually very social and open, but when the door is closed, she must be working on something, so we'll leave her alone unless it's urgent, or we'll just shoot her an email rather than whatever. So what are those things for you in the workplace that are stressful? Because a lot of times when people say it's someone, or a colleague, or a coworker, whomever, who's stressing them out, it's not necessarily the person, it's something that they do that causes a heightened level of stress. So are you willing to be proactive and actually communicate what that stressor is in order to resolve that situation? And that's one of the most important things when we think about workplace strategies. Recognizing the warning signs, but I want to add to that, being able to communicate effectively what your stress triggers are in the workplace. And then taking care of yourself. That's so important. And we like to talk about the airplane analogy, myself and my colleague, when we do these presentations. And for those of you who have been on an airplane, when the flight attendants come out and they give you the spiel about if there happens to be an emergency and how the oxygen mask will be deployed, and what do they say next? They tell you to put it on yourself first. If you have someone seated with you that needs help, then you put it on them. Now, as a mother, for me that feels really counterintuitive because I want to help my child. In the helping profession, when that's what you do all day is help other people, it feels counterintuitive because you want to tend to everyone else's needs. But it makes so much sense when you step back and think about it, because if I'm passed out in the aisle of the plane, I can't help my children. You know, if I'm not doing well physically, mentally, emotionally, and I'm burned out and stressed out in my job, I can't be attentive to the needs of those that I serve. So it's critically important that we remind ourselves, you know what, I do need to take care of myself. And, you know, taking time does not take away from those that I'm helping. It actually equips me to be more effective in helping others. And then giving myself grace, because I forget sometimes. And it's okay. We all do. But today, in this moment, this is what I'm going to do to make sure I'm well so I can tend to all of the other responsibilities that I have. And if I do happen to fall off and forget, I'll get back up and I'll try it again. And implement those small changes based on where I am. And know that over time, those small changes are going to make a big difference. Oh, and the next one I think is really huge. We talk about prioritization and organization. And this is in two parts, the time and task management. And it's a wonderful way to address some of the stress that we experience or we encounter in our lives. So what does this mean, time management? Creating a balanced schedule. You hear a lot of conversation about work-life balance. It's hard. It's hard to find that balance, again, with everything that's going on in our lives and all of our competing priorities. But it's important to try to avoid burnout, to create a balanced schedule. What does a balanced schedule look like? Balance between work and family, between social activities and solitary pursuits, between daily responsibilities and downtime. Finding ways, even if you have to write it out and block it off, whatever that means, to schedule time for you as well. To schedule time for those things you have to do and those pursuits that you enjoy. And I always talk about, for me, the 3 Ps. It's the principles, the practices, and the people that are most important in my life, that are critically important to my well-being. Making sure that I leave time for those 3 Ps and finding ways to make sure that nothing intrudes on my ability to tend to that. Not overcommitting. Where possible, avoiding back-to-back scheduling or trying to cram too much into one day. I know I myself have been guilty of that more times than I'm willing to admit. It's saying, okay, this meeting ends at 2:30, so I can meet you at 2:50. But you know, you have drive time and there's a lot of things that's going on. So by the end of the day, you're 15 minutes late to all your appointments, and it becomes a cycle. It becomes a bit of a nightmare. And so where possible, not overcommitting. And I was speaking with someone the other day, and we were talking about how we try to find balance in our schedule. And he said, you know, I had to tell myself that my yes is only as powerful as my no. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting. What does that mean? What exactly does that mean? He said, well, if I'm not willing to say no to some things, then I'm not able to give my best on other things. And I thought, how powerful is that? That's really profound. And so not feeling guilty because I have to say no, it doesn't mean I'm not interested and I don't want to help, but it means that I'm not able to do it right now. So being willing to say, you know what, that is important to me, or this relationship is important to me, but I don't have time. Can I get back to you on that in 2 weeks? And a lot of times people are really receptive to that, and they appreciate the fact that you want to give your best. They appreciate the fact that you also know that you're not able to in that moment. So being willing to say no sometimes is very critical. And then trying to leave earlier in the morning. I talk about that inevitable sun delay. The sun is shining. There's no bad weather. There aren't any accidents or disabled vehicles on the highway, but everybody, for some unknown reason, is stopped. It happens. And so just giving yourself that extra 15 minutes can make a huge difference. And I love to have that little cushion because I don't like to come in and then have to sit down and try to turn your computer on and get everything started. And of course, then the computer is going to not work until you have to reboot and start it up 2-3 different times. No, but to be able to walk in and say, well, hey, good morning. How are you? How's your day going? Oh, how are your kids doing in school? Or how's your mom? Or whatever. So that I'm relaxed and I'm starting the day on an even keel. That 10-15 minutes sometimes is all that it takes. And then planning regular breaks. This one is really huge because I've often fallen into the trap of feeling like I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to plow through because I have all of this to get done, and I'm not going to get up until I get all of this done. Now, I've read the same sentence 15 times. It's not any clearer. It's not coming to me. It's not making any sense. But I'm going to sit here and I'm going to get it done because I want to be, committed and I want to be productive in the workday. But what we've actually found is that you're more productive if you actually get up, give yourself time to regroup, replenish, take a walk, go to the bathroom, get some water, whatever that is for you, to allow your mind a chance to reset rather than just sitting and trying to plow through. It's actually been shown when you briefly relax and recharge, it causes you to be more productive rather than less productive. So there you go, giving yourself a break. And lunch is really huge. Eating the whole, I'm going to eat lunch at my desk while I work. Yeah, a lot of us are guilty of it, myself included. But giving yourself just that time, even if it's just, if you can't do it every day, and even if you just give yourself 10 minutes, that time is really helpful, and it helps you to recharge and to remain focused throughout the rest of the day. And then there's the task management. A lot of people say what you do is you do the big things first and you get them out of the way, the hard, the difficult, the unpleasant tasks, and then you tackle the small things. But I know people who prefer to do the little things and get all those little nagging things out of the way. And then, you see, they've checked all those things off their list if they like lists like me. And then they're energized and they're feeling confident and positive and they can tackle those big unpleasant things. What works for you? That's what I say. Doing what works for you. You know what your deadlines and your responsibilities are. If you have a strategy that works for you that allows you to get it all accomplished, there's not a hard and fast rule that says you must do it this way in order to be successful. What helps you to feel your best, most efficient, and most effective in your work? Making a list, compiling the order of importance, but making sure you get it done in a way that's pleasant, more pleasant for you, and that you're able to accomplish your deadlines. And then breaking projects into small steps. There's a saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I'm always kind of baffled. I don't know who's eating elephants. I'm not sure where that statement comes from, but the principle remains the same. It's daunting and overwhelming to think of the whole universe of things we need to accomplish. But when we look at, okay, I need to have this done by here, and so to get that done, backwards planning and say, well, if I can get this done by the end of the day, I'm in good shape. If I get this done by the end of the week, I'm on pace to meet my deadline. Rather than looking at everything that needs to be accomplished is a really good way to help manage the stress that comes from those looming deadlines and responsibilities. Oh, delegating responsibility. That's often really hard. I've heard a lot of people say, oh man, I just need a secretary. But when the truth of the matter is, or they have an intern or they have a secretary and they're asking for work to do and they're like, oh, I'll just do it myself because it's faster if I do it myself. How often do we have opportunities to delegate some responsibility? And we have people who are willing to do that and who want to learn that task. And that's how I had to reframe it for myself, to say, you know what, if I'm delegating and this is something you'd like to learn, this is an area or a skill that you'd like to develop, me taking this away from you is not helping you and it's not helping me. My ability and my willingness to be able to delegate where possible is helping both of us to accomplish something. I found a couple of things to be true. One, it doesn't have to be my way. That was a tough lesson for me. Maybe you're not like me, but for me, that was a tough lesson. I've learned some great efficiencies by being willing to step back and to delegate. Also, being willing to just let go and allow someone to grow in that responsibility and allow myself to be freed to prioritize my tasks a little differently is a powerful tool if you're willing to allow yourself to use it. And then being willing to compromise. Whatever you ask, be willing to give. I work with a colleague and we do a lot of these presentations, and there may be times when, one of us is booked and we have a lot of materials to prepare, and so, we'll look out and say, hey, I got a couple of things to do, but I'm running here. Can you help me with this? Well, I'm happy to help. But in the same respect, you can't be all of a sudden just invisible or, oh, he's going to ask for help. I need to run out back, sneak around the back door. But being willing to give what you're willing to ask for. And it's really helpful because it's a way of, forming collegial relationships, working well together, being able to bounce ideas off and to help one another grow and be successful. Oh, and improving emotional intelligence. I've heard it said that, emotions have no place in the workplace. But I've said earlier in this presentation, and I think it bears repeating, that the emotions are somewhat of the canary in the coal mine. Our ability to recognize our emotions and their impact while using gut feelings to guide us is really critical. I'm not saying just you operate and you're ruled and run by your emotions, but being aware, okay, listening to your body, okay, I'm getting upset about this. What is it about this that's causing me to be upset? Being aware. If I'm aware and I'm able to control the emotions and the behavior to adapt to changing circumstances, and I'm acutely aware of how I'm doing, I'm more aware of how my colleagues are doing. And why is that important? It makes it a far more pleasant working environment. If I come in the office and I notice that I work with someone who's typically happy and upbeat and, would stop and just chit chat or share in the morning, but I come in and I notice that my colleague is the temperament is different and they're not speaking, okay, well, I can recognize, something is wrong because I am aware of how she's doing and what her body language is, and I'm aware of her emotions. So if I have something that I need her to do, perhaps I'll wait. Or if our relationship is in a place where we've developed a rapport, I may ask, oh, how are you doing? You look like you're a little upset today. Is there something that I can do for you? Or is there some way in which I can help? And that just makes the work environment that much more pleasant. It's not saying that we're run by our emotions, but it's saying we're aware of our emotions and we implement 5 key skills: realizing when we're stressed, staying connected to our internal emotional experience, recognizing and effectively using nonverbal cues, because they make up the majority of our communication, 95 to 98%. Developing the capacity to meet challenges with humor, and I always like to throw in appropriate humor. Humor is really powerful. It's a powerful tool to help lighten the mood when used appropriately. It can also go downhill fast, so I always like to throw in that little caveat. But humor is a powerful, powerful tool. And learning how to resolve conflict positively. Conflict happens, but how do you resolve them? And that's how our emotional intelligence helps us to be more successful and helps to minimize the working in stressful environments. What else can we do? I like this one. Breaking bad habits. I like the little Superman guy there. Because we get caught up in that sometimes where we try to be all things to all people. So resisting perfectionism. Making sure that the goals we set for ourselves are realistic. What are those goals and expectations that I've set for myself that may be a little unrealistic? And how can I align those and manage my expectations of myself and those around me? Oh, cleaning up your act. Being timely, organized, and disciplined. Oftentimes, I have, early in my career, spent a lot of time looking for things. Someone asked for a file. Yes, I do have it. I think it's in this stack. No, it's in this stack. So just taking the time, and it does take time and commitment to every now and again organize your electronic files and your paper files. You save so much time just by saying, oh, I know it. I love to say, oh, I know exactly where that is, to reach in and just pull it out. Being timely. If you're the person who everyone tells you the meeting starts 15 minutes earlier because they know you're going to be 15 minutes late, surprise everyone and be the first one there, being on time. And flipping your negative thinking. Sometimes in a helping profession it's difficult because we put in a lot of work and we know that the work we're doing is good, but you don't necessarily always see the outcome because it may be way after the input that you've put in. But celebrating small accomplishments, that's where that becomes really important. And being able to, instead of just saying, okay, we've done this, but now we need to move on to this next outcome, being able to say, look at the hard work and effort that we've put into this. Let's go ahead and celebrate this. And now that energizes us and gives us the momentum we need to move on to our next task and our next goal. And then not trying to control the uncontrollable. Focus on what you can control. What is within your realm of control? And focusing on that, because the things we can't control, we can worry about them, but that certainly doesn't change anything. And this is where my colleague often throws in the serenity prayer. We've all heard them. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that can sometimes be a difficult prospect, but when we figure it out, it's very helpful. And so this is just a really quick synopsis or a reminder of the things that we've talked about. Again, recognizing your triggers and warning signs is critically important, and that's always the first step. Increasing the amount of good stress, managing your outlook, taking care of yourself. And these are some of the things that we can do. Some strategies, effective long-term strategies to begin incorporating into our lives to help better manage the stress that we will inevitably encounter from time to time. And again, I just like to emphasize that there's not one right way to do it. We all experience stress in different ways, and we all have different ways of effectively dealing with stress. But we have seen through studies, every study you read about stress management, you'll see 3 things that are critically important and that are very effective at helping to manage stress. And those are eating, moving, and resting. Consider implementing these right away. And I'm not saying that you go home today and clear out your pantry, clear out your refrigerator, and replace everything in your refrigerator, start doing 5 miles every day, and that's not a realistic expectation. But making incremental changes is something that we can all do. And so generally, I've heard a lot of wonderful suggestions as I have been doing these seminars from a lot of people on different ways, tips and strategies to implement into your daily life that are realistic, that can help you to be successful. First of all, exercising is an effective way to lift mood. It increases energy, it sharpens your focus, it relaxes your mind and body. I've heard the entire gamut from people who are like, I have a gym membership and I don't go home until I go to the gym. I keep my gym bag in the car. I go every day. Okay, that's wonderful, but there are a lot of us who aren't quite there. And so I've heard people who say, well, it's as simple as this. I park my car farther in the parking lot. And rather than getting the first spot and walking in, see, this is where leaving the house a little earlier comes in handy too. I use that opportunity to walk a little bit further because I'm getting more exercise on a day-to-day basis. Or I don't take the elevators or the escalator. I take the stairs. Simple things like that. There was one woman, I thought this was wonderful. She's saying, because there's a lot. My schedule is busy, and so my son has a football practice, and I have to go to football practice with him, and then I feel bad because I could be exercising. And so we thought, how wonderful to combine the two. You're there. He knows you're there. There are other parents there who may feel the same way. Why not walk around the football field while they're exercising? Simple things that you can incorporate into your daily life. Sometimes we don't think about that. Or while you're watching a program, perhaps using canned goods and doing some isometric exercises. It doesn't have to be big. If you have young people, children in your life that are a part of your life that are specialty, playing with the kids, getting on the floor and playing with the kids burns up so many calories, and it's a great form of exercise. And again, you're crossing the gamut, and you're also enhancing those relationships and doing other things that are important and that are cathartic and stress relievers. Your diet. If you're like me, you've noticed that if you get hungry, you can get a little cranky. Well, there's a physiological reason for that. Low blood sugar can actually cause anxiety and irritability. And then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, too much food can make you feel lethargic. So there's a reason why if you go and have that big midday meal, you just want to lay under your desk and take a nap. So finding ways to incorporate healthy eating choices into our lives and making sure that our energy is sustained throughout the day is a great way to help to manage to increase our ability to manage the stress that we encounter. So some of the tips and tricks for that I've heard throughout my time doing these presentations is keeping a box. I don't know if you like oatmeal, but keeping a box of oatmeal in your desk is a really good idea. If you happen to be running late one morning and you didn't get a chance to eat breakfast, it's a great way to have something that's quick and easy, or granola bars or whatever it is you like to eat, a couple fruit. Being able to incorporate some more healthy choices and incorporating, fruit and vegetables and more water into your diet. These are all ways to help make incremental changes. Just watching your choices. And another one had a great tip. She said, well, I pack my lunch at night because then that way I'm not rushed in the morning just taking whatever is handy and running out the door, but I'm really mindful about what I'm actually eating. And so I pack more healthy or nutritious meals by packing it at night, and then I'm sure that I have something to eat. And I thought, oh, what a great idea. I should implement that strategy. And then finally, resting. Adequate sleep is really important. It's one of the things that we forget, and we tend not to realize just how critical it is to our ability to manage the stress we encounter. Being well rested facilitates maintaining emotional balance. Now, for me, that's the most difficult of the three. I don't know about you. I've heard folks that say, oh, no, exercise is the worst or whatever. But for me, it's finding that time to rest. And so what are some tips and tricks for that? When you were a little kid, your mom said you had to go be in bed at a certain time. You had a bedtime. I had to go back to giving myself a bedtime. Otherwise, there's no telling when I would finally collapse into bed. And so that's something that, for me, works well. I was reading a couple studies, and I'm still doing research on it, that talks about how our bodies are attuned and the rhythm of our bodies, and how light impacts our ability to rest because our eyes are fooled because we're used to going with the cycle of the sun. And so they're saying about how having those blinds that completely darken the room and to keep out the ambient light will help you rest, or dimming the clocks, or having dimmers or covers over your clock so that light. Oh, and another thing, being in bed and on your cell phone or your laptop, and it's directly into your pupils, so your body's it's light. I'm supposed to be up. So finding what works for you. What are the things that help you be more rested and to get the rest you need in order to be better balanced and manage the stress in your life? Tackling stress and breaking bad habits can be an overwhelming thought, but addressing stress does not have to be stressful. You start where you are and you take it one day at a time. It's okay to take baby steps. I've said before in the presentation that little steps go a long way, and the more you do them over time, it has the greater effect it'll have in your life. And so I like to end with a little, stress SOS, I call it. So that's all well and good. We've talked about a lot of things that we can do to manage stress, a lot of strategies that, frankly, it might take a little time to get rolling on some of these. So what do you do in the midst of an immediately stressful situation, a stress crisis? If you can, taking time away, and I'm not talking about, so I'll be back next week. Sometimes that's not possible. But giving yourself time to reset, to think clearly about the problem or the situation that has arisen. It could be just a walk to the water fountain, a walk to the bathroom. Just enough time to clear your head. A quick break is a powerful tool in order to help you be able to reframe and to gain focus and to be able to respond accurately and adequately to the situation. Talking it over with someone is also really key. Someone you can trust who is both supportive and empathetic, because it helps to give you another perspective that you may not have thought of. And sometimes it helps just to talk about it. They may not have a response, they may not have the solution, but often talking through it, it'll help to clarify what's going on in your mind, and it will help you to come to a reasonable solution. Connecting with others, because that helps to buffer some of the negative effects of stress. And looking for humor in the situation. Again, when used appropriately, it's a great way to diffuse tension. So in the middle of an intense and a stressful situation, at that time, eating, moving, and resting, that's great if you've been doing it. But in the midst of this situation, just taking some time to do these 4 things as you think through the crisis is a powerful way to immediately manage stress that you may encounter. I thank you so much for your time and your attention. This is some of the other workshop series that we provide through MHA. If you have any questions, any comments that you'd like to share, I'm happy to receive them, but I appreciate all of you who are able to attend. Thank you.
And thank you. We did actually have a question come into the box here. We still have time to take a couple of more. If you've got any feedback, any questions, please go ahead and use the chat window below the video screen. This comes from earlier on in your presentation. Mm-hmm. This person works for the state system and runs the relaxation room at one of the mental health facilities. And they've got an amazing amount of equipment there, and good equipment, but there is a stigma. Some staff associate the room with stress. How do we get rid of this stigma?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think that's why these conversations are critically important. If you talk to everyone, we all experience stress in some way. And it's the same, like the relaxation room, and also just mental health. We call them mental health days, just taking time just to replenish and regroup. If I am willing to say, you know what, I need this because, you know, working in this field, this is something that we know is critically important, that's starting to go against the stigma itself. That's starting to set the example. And working with colleagues, so one of the things that we've done to look at the stigma within my workplace is we've talked about what are some strategies that we can use to help address stress, because we talk about it, but no one ever really does anything about it. So we've come up with ways, and it might be low-hanging fruit. Even though there's a relaxation room, people aren't willing to go there. Someone decided to bring in, you know, a massage chair. And we decided, well, maybe let's make it Relaxation Fridays or whatever it is. So finding a partner, and it's always better when you can have someone, a cohort that's willing to go to partner with you to bring the relaxation, because it helps to normalize the experience when more people are participating in it. But I wish we had one.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, so we will wrap things up for today. I'll share a little bit of background information with our audience here. We don't always have a live audience in the room with us, and today is an example of that. And I advise our speakers that sometimes they're going to have to draw on internal energy. I can see you had a lot of difficulty drawing on that internal energy and getting yourself up for the presentation today. Good job. Folks, thanks for joining us. We'll keep the CEU link available to you. We'll send you the link to the slides as well and other issues. We'll send you a follow-up email that will include an evaluation. It'll probably hit your mailbox either tomorrow morning or early next week, but be looking for that. Our next program is scheduled currently for December the 12th, and it's on compassion fatigue. Oh. And so it's kind of an overlapping topic, and I think you guys might be interested in tuning into that as well. We encourage you to invite your colleagues as well to join our email list. We do almost all of our announcements via email these days, and you can join our email list right off of our website, off of mimhtraining.com. If you logged into today's program, guess what? You're automatically on our email list. I'm sure that's a surprise to you. So, folks, thanks again for joining us. Riisa, thank you. Excellent job.
My pleasure. Thank you.